I'm 38 years old, never married, and I don't have a home or children. I've lived my whole life running around to make a living. I work in the painting industry, working during the day and coming home tired. I rent a small house to sleep in. I spend my day surrounded by walls, paint, and the smell of paint. I always used to say to myself, "Be patient, John. The day will come when you'll rest." When the opportunity arose to travel to the Gulf, I didn't hesitate for a moment. There, people seem to be doing well and work is plentiful. But, like any unsupported person, I worked at anything, any job, any time, and at any price. One day, a well-dressed man came to me. He said, "I have an old school that I want to convert into a training center, and I'd like someone to take on painting it completely. But the work has to be completed within a week." The school is large and I was alone, so I told him, "That's impossible. I need at least 3 workers with me." He said to me, "Give me the price you want, but you must finish the work within a week." I won't lie. Greed killed me. The amount he offered me, no one had ever given me in my entire life. I said to myself, should I refuse? I'm abroad, not to rest, but to work hard and make money. And that's when I made the decision that would change my life. To finish the work within a week, I would have to work at night and sleep only 2 hours during the day. And what I didn't tell you, this school is very old, and the neighborhood people say it's built on an old cemetery. Honestly, I didn't pay any attention to that. I'm John. I don't talk to superstitions. Walls don't talk. But that night they began to talk. The first night I entered the school at 10 p.m. The smell was awful. A mixture of dust, mold, and cold. I worked for an hour, 2 hours, until it was so silent that I could hear my heartbeat. And as I was painting the walls of one of the classrooms on the second floor, I heard something. A soft sound coming from the ceiling, like a moving piece of wood. I stopped and sat in silence. There was nothing. I said to myself, fatigue is starting to affect me. But as I left the classroom, I heard the door of another classroom in the corridor close by itself. I stood still. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. My feet were stuck to the floor, and I heard the sound. Someone was breathing heavily, coming from the direction of the stairs leading to the school tunnel. And at that moment, I realized that this school wasn't empty. I remained standing. It was as if my feet were stuck to the ground, and that heavy breath was coming from my chest, not the tunnel. I heard the sound repeat. Rough breathing, as if someone was panting, or as if someone was smelling you and slowly approaching. I grabbed the flashlight and walked with heavy steps, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The tunnel stairs were wooden, and each step made a sharp sound in my ears, as if in pain. The tunnel door was half open, and there was no light in it. I went down, a step, then another. Before I reached the middle of the stairs, I smelled something burnt or suffocated. The smell of meat, but not cooked meat, rather dead meat. When I reached the bottom, I found nothing but pitch darkness. I turned on the flashlight, but there was nothing there. The walls were black, the floor was covered in dry dust, and the cold penetrated to the bones. But at the end of the room, there was an old chair, like an old school chair, broken on one side. And behind that chair, Something passed quickly. I turned the light that way, but there was no one there. My head started spinning and I thought, maybe it was a mouse or just an illusion. And here's where the trouble begins. When you say, maybe it was just, you give that something else a chance to get closer. When I went up, I felt like someone was standing behind me, but I didn't want to turn around. I just closed the door and said, "John, don't go down that tunnel again." I went to finish my work, but that sound, that heavy breathing, I started to hear it even in the classroom I was working in. The sound was no longer coming from the tunnel. The sound, now, was coming from the walls. After that night, I returned to my room and slept like the dead, but when I woke up, my head felt heavy. It was as if I'd been dreaming, but without having seen a dream. It was as if I'd been living in a colorless, timeless fog. I went to work as usual, but at one point, I looked at one of the walls in the classroom I'd painted the day before. It wasn't painted. An entire classroom, as if I'd never even touched it. And I'm sure I'd painted it. I kept thinking, could I have been imagining things? Was I busy with something else? But the second time was much stranger. I was painting the wall, and suddenly I felt a heaviness in my shoulders. My heart started beating rapidly and my vision became blurry, and suddenly, I found myself standing in front of the tunnel door, holding the flashlight. I don't know how much time passed, and I don't remember whether I went down or not. I began to find traces of paint in places I'd never entered. In one of the classrooms, I found the entire wall covered in black paint, even though I hadn't brought that color. And worse, I was passing by a broken mirror in one of the classrooms, and I saw my face, but it wasn't me. My face was black, my eyes were red, and I was laughing. I quickly turned on the light and began to convince myself, it's just tiredness, lack of sleep. Your greed is what's ruined you. But I would wake up at night and find my hands covered in black paint. The smell of the paint even permeated my dreams. Even while I was asleep, I could see that school, breathing. School is not a place. School is a living being. That day, I decided to complete my work, but without approaching the tunnel. I told myself I would work on the second floor, in the classroom whose window overlooked the main door. The sun was slowly setting. In the midst of that dead silence, I heard something I shouldn't have heard. Someone was singing. The voice was faint, distant, but clear. A simple melody, repeated like an old song. The words said nothing, but froze my blood in my veins. Day after day, John came home. I felt a shiver run through my body, and I began to scan the deserted square with my eyes. A classroom, 2 classrooms, an empty alley. No one. But the voice continued, and then it changed. It was no longer the voice of a little child. It was my own voice. I was the one who heard myself singing. Yes, my own voice, my own tone, but I wasn't singing. I quickly went back inside, despite my cold sweat, and told myself I would just finish the work. I went back to finish painting, but when I looked up at the wall, there was writing above my head. It read, "Back." I turned off the light, then turned it back on. It wasn't there, but I wasn't the one who wrote it. I didn't have a brush or paint. I was using only white. and the writing was in dark red. And then I started hearing my name repeated non-stop. John, John, John. It was as if the whole school was calling me. It was like a call that went straight through my head. I started walking down the hallways and found the lights on in closed classrooms. I turned them off, but every time I entered, I found places I'd never been before. An entire classroom covered in paint, even though I'd never entered it. And at night, in bed, I woke up to a sentence whispered directly into my ear. You never left. You were ours from the beginning. My body trembled, and cold sweat trickled down my back. I opened my eyes and found myself in a classroom, not in my room. I stood up, terrified, looking around, as if I were moving from house to house, from dream to dream, from nightmare to reality. I kept repeating, "Who's calling my name?" The next day, I was standing in the middle of a classroom, and I saw my shadow in front of me, even though the sun was behind me, but that shadow wasn't behaving like me. It was standing, but not moving, not speaking, just staring at the wall and breathing slowly, as if something was inhabiting it. I was saying to myself, enough. I have to finish the work, get the money, and forget this nightmare completely. But the school was getting closer and closer. It was like a monster feeding off my existence. And every time I returned, it tried to infiltrate my mind deeper than the last time. That day, I was painting on the ground floor, and the light was very dim, as if the school was absorbing every ray of light I brought with me. As I moved the brush, I heard a scratching sound in the next classroom. I ignored it at first, but the sound began to get louder, like claws scraping against the wood of the walls. I stopped, grabbed the flashlight, and walked slowly. I reached the door, opened it quietly. The classroom was empty, but in the corner, I saw something moving quickly. Then it disappeared. I turned a light on the spot, and all I saw was the wall. And there was writing on it. I'm back, and I'm still here. And when I turned around, I found it. Standing in the middle of the classroom, silent. His face resembled a human face, but it had no eyes, no mouth, a smooth face. Just skin and heavy breathing. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't moving, but I knew he saw me. My entire body froze. I wanted to run away, but my feet wouldn't move. Then, a voice began to whisper in my ear, "This body is not yours." The voice wasn't external, it was internal, as if the entity was speaking through me. And when I tried to back away, the entity didn't move, but its shadow began to expand, spreading across the ground, until it formed a circle surrounding me. And I was in the middle, alone and weak, as if I were inside an open grave. I turned off the lamp and began to recite the prayers I'd memorized in my head, but the voice began to laugh. A cold, deep laugh. "You're trying to run away from me, and you're the one who came back." Yesterday, I was in my rented apartment. I drank a glass of water and lay on my bed, completely exhausted. But when I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my bed. No blankets, no white walls. I was sleeping on the cold floor, black dust covering my chest, and a smell that could only be smelled in graves. I woke up, startled, searching with my eyes, searching with my mind, muttering to myself, "What's going on?" The basement door was closed, but strangely, the light was on. No lamp, no candle, but it was there. It was as if the school was on fire inside me, and in the middle of that room, there was a small iron door, one I'd never seen before. I approached it slowly, and before I reached out, I heard laughter. My laughter. Yes, I could hear myself, but in a different version. A dark version. Enjoying my suffering. I told you, you came back, and you never came out. I opened the door and entered, and I swear to God, it was as if I had returned to 1970. Everything was old, chalk on the floor, and the blackboard read, "We didn't die. We were waiting for you." There was a notebook on the table. I leaned over to read it, and I saw the name, Professor John. But I'm not a professor. I'm just a painter. I've never worked in education, but the handwriting was mine, and the signature, mine. I sat there, trying to wake up from this madness. I said to myself, maybe this is just a dream. Yes, a dream, nothing more. But when I read the last page, my madness increased. The oath has been taken. John has returned to us. And the next lesson, disappearance. And when I looked up, there was a student sitting in the front row. His face wasn't clear, but he was breathing like me. And he raised his hand, and he began to write, without a pen. And I was looking at the wall, and written in front of me, in clear handwriting, were the words, "We kept writing, and you kept repeating. We kept waiting for you, and you kept forgetting." I was asleep, but I wasn't dreaming. My mind was empty, and yet the voice was still there, and always the same phrase repeated. The third door must not be opened. The first time I heard it, I said to myself, just hallucinations, perhaps from fatigue, staying up late, or fear. But when the same sentence is repeated in the same tone, with the same terrifying calm, you know it's not your mind that's speaking. I entered the school that morning and decided to confront it. I entered without hesitation, without mercy, without fear. It was as if I was entering death and fully aware of it. I headed to the basement. I turned on the flashlight, brought my camera phone with me. I said to myself, if something happens, I must leave a trace. But in the basement, I found a new wall, unpainted, without any trace of my previous work. And in the middle of the wall, there was a door. Small, old, without a handle. Just a hole carved into the wall, like a hidden door. Above it, engraved in a blood-red color, when it opens, enter and do not return. And a faint voice whispered in my ear again, the third door must not open. But as if something were guiding me, I reached out, pushed the door, and entered. I found myself inside a classroom, but unlike any I had known before, the walls had no corners, and the ceiling rose and fell slowly, as if breathing. The blackboard read, "All of us are here, except you." And the seats were full, but no people. Only clothes, shoes, glasses. It was as if those who had been here had evaporated. In the middle of the class, there was a single empty seat. On it was engraved the phrase, "Sit, and memory will return." Slowly shuffling, fearfully, I sat down. I lost consciousness for a few seconds before the walls began to turn into screens. Each screen displayed a scene from my life, but as if someone were filming me from afar. My childhood, my illness, my solitude in the great outdoors, my laughter, my moments of brokenness, all were being watched, and I heard a voice saying, "You were never alone. We were always with you." I stood up, my whole body trembling. But before I could leave, the door closed, and I heard the voice again, but this time my own voice. But it wasn't me. "You have opened what should not have been opened, and now you must learn to become a master."
That night, I entered school with the Maghrib call to prayer. But in the afternoon, while I was still in the apartment, I could hear the bell, the school bell, ringing every minute without stopping. I said to myself, "I'm going to finish this crazy movie. I'm going to go see what's going on and end this nightmare." But when I arrived, the school wasn't school. The big door was open, but inside it was dark. And without realizing it, the door closed behind me. I tried to go back, but the door had disappeared. Even the wall it had been in was gone. Just a long corridor. No light reached it. I walked. One step, then another. But the corridor got longer, and the walls began to change. An old blackboard became a mirror, and the door in front of me turned into a staircase leading down. And as I went down, I found places I'd never seen before. I found a hall with many desks, and on each desk, a picture of me. John in different corners of the school. John sleeping, John crying, John washing his face in the sink. Who was filming me? And why are these pictures here? I approached a picture. I was standing in a classroom, and behind me something was scratching the wall. But I didn't feel it at the time. I held up the picture and began to contemplate it. And in the silence, I heard a man's voice. The same voice, that of a faceless being. The school is what remembers, and you are just a memory in its memory. I went back to look for a door to leave, but every door I opened took me back to the same corridor. My mind began to crumble. Sometimes I could hear my own footsteps running, but I was standing still, and I could hear my own voice screaming, "Get me out!" But I didn't even open my mouth, until I reached a corridor with a single blackboard. On it was written, "Get out of here. John is dead." But I was still alive. I reached over to wipe the blackboard, but my hand sank into it. The wall became liquid, and the blackboard absorbed my hand. Even my shoulder began to disappear into it. With difficulty, I withdrew my hand, but it remained covered in a layer of black paint. That wouldn't be removed. Suddenly, there was silence. A soft voice. A little girl's voice. From high up in the ceiling. "We need you to stay, John, so the classroom doesn't remain empty." and a picture fell in front of me. It was a picture of a classroom full of students, with John standing like a teacher. But the students' faces were not human. Their eyes were wide, with no white. Their mouths were open, but they weren't speaking. They just looked at the camera, as if they knew that you were now seeing them. Day 9 or 10. I no longer know. Time here doesn't count. Sometimes I wake up and feel as if it's daytime. And sometimes the sun rises in the middle of the night. But there's one thing I'm certain of. This school isn't a building. This school is memories. And those memories aren't mine. But I was inside them. I was searching an old hall. I found an archive, worn papers, a musty smell, teachers' names, dates. All dating back to the 1970s. But one name was repeated on every page. John bin Haj Ibrahim. A student who died in 1978. Accidental fall from the 3rd floor. The school has decided to close the file once and for all. But I am John. And I am alive. I flipped through the trembling papers in my hands. I found an old, black and white photo. A classroom, all the children standing. And in the middle, a little boy, with a faint smile. Under the picture was written, "The late John, the last picture." And I swear to God, he looked just like me. It was as if I were looking into a mirror, only smaller. It was as if he was me, before. The music turns to the sound of a heartbeat gradually stopping. I left the archive room, trembling. But the door I had entered through had disappeared. I found myself in a blurry classroom. Everything distorted. The blackboard melted, the floor became liquid. The walls were covered with featureless faces. And each face muttered a single word. I'm back. I wanted to run, but my feet were heavy as lead. Then I began to hear children's voices singing. The same old chant. John is back home. The door to the 1st floor slammed shut. And the next lesson, forget who you were. Suddenly, a staircase appeared in front of me. I went up. Then I went up even further. On each floor, chairs and names. But every name was John. John 1, John 2, John 3. It was as if the school was repeating me, copying me, and trying each copy all over again. At the end of the stairs, there was a small door. On it was written, "The original room." I entered. It was a white hall, empty. In the middle of it, a single chair. On top of the chair, a notebook. I opened it. And in it were the same chapters, the same events I had experienced. But on the last page was written in bold, "The story never ends." Because John never left. Every time, he comes back. Music suddenly rises, a face appears from within the wall, saying, "And now you know. You are not the only John. You are the copy that succeeded." The night was different. The school was no longer hidden. The place no longer changed meaninglessly. That night, everything was organized. And that's exactly what terrified me the most. It was as if the school knew I was almost there. I walked down a long corridor, lined with old photos, all of them of students. But every student in the photos was me. In each photo, I was a different age, my clothes changed. But the features were the same, the look was the same. And beneath each photo, a single sentence. Version 3, failed in the confrontation. Version 7, lost his mind. Version 12, caught in a fire. I stopped in front of one photo. In it, John was drowning in a tub of black paint. And beneath it, the sentence read, Version 16, tried to escape. I was trying to convince myself that I was the version that succeeded. But something inside me whispered, are you really the first? Or just another version, living the same movie? Then I heard a voice that pierced everything, reaching deep within me. To know, you must face them. And suddenly, the wall split. And out they went. The music dropped suddenly, multiple footsteps, heavy breathing, an echo from the past. 3, 4, 7 men emerged from the corridor. And each one of them, me. But in different forms, like mirrors of lives I hadn't fully lived. John the 10-year-old. John the tired worker. John the angry, depressed, radical, desperate, violent believer. Each one looked at me and said in my own voice, I am the real one. He and they are. I am the original. No one is real. We are all ghosts. Gathering my strength, I shouted, I am John, one, alive, remembering, and I want out of this hell. But they didn't answer with words. They answered with advances. They began to move toward me. Each one of them did something that sent a shiver down my spine. The first, blood dripped from his eyes. The second, banged his head against the wall non-stop. The third, spoke, but his words were inverted, spoken backward. The fourth came very close and said, what is your memory, but files stored in a dead school? I closed my eyes and tried to recall everything. Who brought me here? Why me? Who was the first? And suddenly, a light appeared. But it wasn't an ordinary light. It was the kind that makes shadows appear clearly. I opened my eyes. And each copy of me cast a huge, strange-looking shadow. But I had no shadow. And then I understood. I am not a copy. I am a reflection. School doesn't make people. It makes images. And I am just a picture in a story that never changes. But to get out, I have to stop the chain. The music slowly falls, the ticking of an old clock repeats. I pulled out my paintbrush, walked over to the first version of me, and asked, do you want us to stay here forever? Or do we finish the film and let one of us get out? He looked at me in silence and held out his hand. Then the rest of the version stopped. Then they all held out their hands too. After the confrontation, I had no strength left, nor nerves. But the door opened, and there was an inner voice, whispering deep within me. You will enter now, but you will not come out the same. I knew that this room was the original room. I entered. It was white, no furniture, no windows. Just a silent void. And in the middle of it, there was a small child, facing the wall, drawing with black chalk. I approached him slowly. And before I could speak, he said, without turning to me, I am not John. I created the school. I froze. The voice of a child, but the mind of this voice was larger than any human mind I had ever heard. I asked him, my voice trembling, what do you mean you created the school? Who are you? He answered, still drawing. I'm the first victim. Before I died, I wanted to leave a place that would relive the same pain, time after time. So I named it, school. I asked him, "So, you're a genie? Or a spirit?" He replied, "I'm a memory, but the kind that lives and creates an environment to reproduce. I'm not a genie, nor a human. I'm a deep-rooted sadness, shaped like a school." The walls began to move, the walls breathing like chests. And the child continued, his voice cold. "Whoever enters here is transformed, either into a copy, or into a new chapter in a story, or into a new chapter in an endless nightmare." I asked him, trembling, "Why me? Why did you choose me?" He laughed. The laughter of a child who knows things he shouldn't. Then he said, "Because you're the only one who spoke. The rest died silently. You told the story, and gave me a chance to live more. In every video, in every word, in every scene." Then one of the walls of the room began to open, revealing a lit corridor. The boy pointed to it and said, "This is the door. You can go out. But if you go out, the whole story will be yours. You'll live it, you'll tell it. And it'll drag everyone who hears it with you." I paused. I was thinking, should I go out and carry the curse with me? Or should I stay and break the cycle forever? Then I said to him, "I am not the messenger of your terror. I am John. And this school, I will go out alone, but I will close it behind me." I took the black chalk from his hand and began drawing a circle on the ground. I wrote verses from the Quran, symbols from my memory, and began screaming, "I am the real me, and the rest is dust. I am the rest, and the school will burn." The child began screaming. The walls melted, and the blackboard opened from beneath the ground, emitting thick black smoke. And at that moment, I was alone in pure darkness. Quiet voice, heavy breathing, then light footsteps on dry leaves. I woke up. In the middle of a courtyard. The sun was shining. No school. No door. No blackboard. But beside me, there was an old notebook, moving of its own accord. And on it was written, the final chapter. John left, but the shadow remained. "20 years have passed. I remember well. It was a Friday, when I decided to return to that land. The old school. The school that left something in me that I can never erase. Everything had changed. The road was now paved, and the buildings rose tall. But where the school had once been, nothing remained. Only empty land, covered with dry grass, and a heavy silence, as if it had never been alive. I walked through the grass, searching with my eyes for any sign. A stone, a tree, an iron door. But nothing. Not a trace. I stood in the middle of the ground, and suddenly, that feeling returned. A chill in my feet. The air had changed its scent, and that heavy breath returned. Then a voice came to me, not an audible voice, but a feeling that penetrated the inside, a whisper in the soul. "I've returned, but too late." The sound of a racing heartbeat plus the melody of a slowly tearing wound. In a corner of the ground, where the school had stood, I saw a small hole, like a touch of the past. And inside it, a tree root, stiff. I stepped closer, and my eyes froze in shock. There was an old rope, hanging from the root, but it was cut in the middle. No body, no blood, no other mark, just the rope, as if something had been hanging from it, and had broken, or been cut. In an instant, images poured in. All the faces I'd seen. The voices. The children singing. The copies I'd faced. They all spoke of the one who remained hanging. And it came back to me. That child in the original room. When he said, "The story repeats itself. And it needs someone to stay." Freak sobbing plus long musical sigh. Then came the question I couldn't escape. Was it me who left? Or did something else leave? And I was the one who remained? Who is the real John? Is he the one writing now? Or is he the one who hung there 20 years ago? Very sad music, the sound of a flute and a cold breath of wind. I shouted, but no one answered. No one listens here. I sat down on the ground and took out a small notebook. I had hidden it with me for 20 years, and I wrote in it, "I am John." Or maybe I was. I came back to see the end, but the tree buried me. I closed the notebook and buried it next to the root. Then I said, "If anyone finds this thing, don't come back. Don't try to understand more." The story was enough. Final shot, the camera slowly pans away from the ground, barren land, overcast sky, and a small notebook buried next to a dead trunk. And before I left, I heard in the distance, the children's voices returned again with their old chant. John came home, but his mind remained in flames. And here the story ends. But if you thought the horror was over, you're wrong. The night is still long, and the shadows still whisper in the corners. If you enjoyed the story, don't wait. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel. What's coming will be darker and more terrifying. We'll meet in the next nightmare.